Well, hello, my friends. I'm Susan Smith. Welcome into my studio. I'm coming to you from the inland northwest of the United States, and it is a gorgeous, gorgeous sunny morning where I am. I've got my glasses off to reduce the window glare because there's a window right in front of me. We've got a filter across it. We've done all the things to try and make this as clear for you as possible. So, let me know where you're tuning in from. I always love to see where quilters are coming from during these sessions because we often kind of circle the globe, and that is pretty darn exciting to get a chance to join up with quilters all over the world who are interested in machine quilting. Today's project is going to be a small whole cloth quilt, and a little bit different from the last one I did, and I'm kind of thinking of making a series out of these because it's quite fun, and I had a really good response to that first one. So this is number 2. But before we dive into the project, let's take our usual couple minutes to chat and get acquainted while my husband Dave, who's doing all the techie stuff in the background, makes sure that, sound levels are good and broadcast is happening and all the things. So let me know where you're chiming in from. Dave will put some of those on the screen for me. Betsy from sunny Orangeville, Ontario. Oh, nice. Fellow Canadian. The tech guy's having trouble. Okay, well, while he figures that out a little bit, I'll just mention a brief thanks here. And the biggest one, of course, is to my husband, Dave, who you guys don't usually see, but he is critical to the success of these YouTube videos. It is not a one-woman operation, let me tell you. So he's behind a bank of monitors and, routers and just a spaghetti of wires, keeping all the things going. So a huge thanks to Dave. And also to our friend Dan, who graciously allows us to use his beautiful guitar music during these episodes. So hello to Joey, playing Spider Solitaire to pass the time. It's better to be early than late. You must have chimed in early, Joey. Janet, first time catching you live from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Welcome, Janet. And Joey, it's been in the 90s the last 3 days in Southern California. Always worried about fires. Yeah, that is such a thing in the spring, isn't it? In summer. Jody in Montana City, Montana. So nice to see you. Courtney, Huntsville, Texas. We're getting the U.S. covered. Carol from Bend, Oregon. That's not too far from me. Any more, Dave? We're having trouble with getting the little chat bars up there so you guys can see them. Betsy, since discovering this channel, I've passed on the link to so many of my South Ontario quilting friends. That's so nice of you, Betsy. I appreciate it. LF, Lori, I think. Good morning. So pleased to be on from Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. Good evening from Germany. There we go. We've got around the world. I'm so glad you joined us. And of course, I can't pronounce your name. I'm sorry. I should be able to. I'm German too, but I actually don't speak it. Regina, cool and drizzling in southeastern Massachusetts. Penny from Minnesota. Kay from Fort Worth, Texas. We've certainly got the U.S. covered. Carla from Washington, Yelm, Washington. Penny, Western Washington. Beverly from Tennessee. Linda in the UK, also in the evening. Fantastic, Linda. You join so often, and I'm always so glad to see you. Kate from Lexington, Michigan. Teresa, Northern Idaho. Great. Tiffany's Quilting Life sent me. So nice. Yes, I've recently gotten to know Tiffany. This past week, she was the guest on my podcast, which is Interviews with Quilters, and I'll probably talk more about that later in the actual show. Hello from Charlottesville, Virginia. Cindy from Iowa, absolutely perfect weather. Oh, nice. So probably not going to quilt in my dungeon. Yeah, I'm so fortunate to have windows in mine. It makes recording a bit difficult, but it's awfully nice to work with all the natural light. Pat from Vermont. Sarah from Georgia. Anne from Massachusetts, and we may not be able to get through them all, Dave. There is a ton. I'm so glad to see you all here. Christine from Iowa, Tiffany's Quilting Life. Good morning, Susan. Hey to you. And it's the girl with the coffee cup. Yes, it is. Of course, it says hello, fall. Sorry about that. I'll just cover that up, okay? Because I'm really glad summer's coming, but it is a nice big jug. Vancouver, BC. Fantastic. I'm a BC girl myself. Teresa, I listened to the interview. Very nice with Tiffany's Quilting Life. Yeah. Good deal. Well, I'm so glad to see you all here. I think do you have enough time, Dave, to have all the kinks are worked out? Yes? We can go on? Okay. I'll take a good sip and we'll go into our proper introduction and we'll get quilting.
Welcome to Quilting's first reality show, live and unscripted with Susan Smith.
And there we have it. So huge thanks to our son Will, who does those intros for me. And we have a few more that we're working on the back burner, so we might get a little more variety in those great introductions. He loves doing a thing with voices. Yeah, so coffee cup in hand, let's talk about today's project. First, I'll introduce myself. I am Susan Smith. You are in my studio, Stitched by Susan, and I call these episodes live and unscripted because they are being streamed in real time. And I welcome you into my studio to just watch the process of a quilt as I work on it in absolutely real time. There's no editing going on. So thread breaks happen. You get to see it. The last episode, I had trouble with the tension, the stitch formation on my machine. I changed out a bobbin and all of a sudden there was something amiss. So the viewers were chiming in and we just worked down through a checklist, try this, check that, rethread the other. And we got through it. And I think that kind of thing can be really, really helpful, especially if you're a novice machine quilter, just to see that these things happen to every quilter and get to see kind of the process of working through them. And I think it can be helpful to know how long things actually take. You know, when you see an edited, trimmed up video, it looks almost magical. You know, all the hard parts are kind of edited out. But in these episodes, you get to see the real thing. I like to call it Quilting's first reality show because it's all here for you. So I hope that is helpful to many of you. And I sure have a lot of fun sharing as I'm working. So I learned the other day, just as a side note, that working in public, the phrase, is actually a trending thing. Who knew? But it's basically what I do on these shows, but applied to all kinds of industries where you just show the nitty gritty of whatever it is that you're doing as you do it before the product is, done, produced. And I thought that's kind of neat. So, I got in right ahead of that trend. I'm quite proud of myself. Anyway, today we're working on a whole cloth quilt. I've got you guys can't see it. Let me put my coffee cup down. I'm going to show you the backing fabric. Super cute little dinosaurs. They're right side up. Look at me go. I got that figured out the right way. So that's the backing fabric. And much like Wholecloth number 1, I picked this kind of busy, interesting backing fabric that's going to kind of be the feature of the quilt. And then the front side is just a solid color, and it's going to have the interesting quilting design on it. So it's kind of a reversible quilt when it's all said and done. So interesting quilting on one side, cute print on the other side. So this is kind of a boyish little quilt, and that will be quite fun. So I'm going to start loading. And as I talk through the loading process, I'm sorry, Dave is distracting me here. Yes, he's telling me there's a lot of things I haven't covered yet. So I will. I'll get my fabric in place and we'll talk about a few of those things, which I need to. I quilt on a gamma long arm with a 26-inch throat, and that's what I'll be working on today. You can see her right here. This is Lucy. She has a name. She's my sidekick. If you are enjoying these shows and if you're finding them helpful, I would really appreciate if you would like and subscribe, and in particular, hit the thumbs up below the episode. That really helps me to get a little more viewership and a little wider audience, because I do think these episodes can be really helpful to quilters who are maybe in the earlier stages of their journey. And then a couple other things. YouTube episodes obviously are free to everyone on YouTube, but if you are interested in supporting us, it's very easy to do that. You can just go to buymeacoffee.com/Stitched by Susan, and Dave will put in a handy little link for you. And a lot of you have been very generous in supporting us, and we really, really appreciate it, because that's how we keep upgrading our equipment. So Dave, being a techie guy, he always wants a top-notch production, right? And to this point, we've been recording with our iPhones, like literally our iPhones out of our pockets that we record with. And so it's not fancy, let me tell you. And we would really like to upgrade to actual cameras. It would help with lighting balances, and it would help not to have to disassemble the whole thing and reset it up every time we go to record. So that would be lovely. Anyway, as I said, buymeacoffee.com/Stitched by Susan. You can do a single donation of as little as $5. You can choose a monthly subscription if you want to. And then also, I do have a podcast too, which might be fun for you to listen to while you're quilting or working in your sewing studio or even out walking. And it's called Measure Twice, Cut Once, and Other Life Lessons Learned from Quilters. And it's interview based, so each one I'm talking to another crafter or quilter, and they're telling their stories. So I know one of the ladies who's here this morning, I greeted her already, is Tiffany, and she has a YouTube channel as well called Tiffany's Quilting Life. And it's very impromptu and very casual and a bit like mine. You get to just see what her day looks like and what her working processes are. So last Wednesday, Tiffany was my guest on the podcast episode. So listening to that is very easy, podcast.stitchedbysusan.com, and you can find all the past episodes there. So, and I think Dave has dropped the link in the chat actually too to make it super easy. All right. One last thing before we dive into loading this quilt. I know I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, but trying to get a lot of things in here. I am offering later today and then again tomorrow a workshop. Geared, I guess, toward people who maybe have a long arm machine or want to, but feel intimidated, feel like there's so much to learn, there's so many decisions, I don't know what to do, I don't know if I'm suited for this process. So the workshop is called Freehand Quilting Demystified, and it's 5 myths that tie freehand quilters in knots and how to break free of them. So I come with a lot of photos of my work and even of some students' work and their comments, to break through some of those myths that I feel like hold people back from freehand quilting. And that's what I do on these shows is freehand work. It's what I absolutely love. And equally, I love to show others that it's within your reach too. If you want to quilt freehand, you absolutely can. It is a skill. It's just like handwriting. It can be learned and advanced and perfected. You can do it. So if you're interested in that workshop, Dave's going to put a link in the chat window. Do note that if you're watching this as a replay, that may not be active anymore. So again, there's one airing this afternoon and one tomorrow. It's the same workshop. I'm just presenting it 2 more times. So if you're interested in that, check it out. And as I load, then I'll just keep chatting as well. The workshop is very much an introduction to freehand quilting and opening your eyes to the possibilities that are there. And at the end of it, I do introduce my online paid course, which is called Freehand Quilting Masterclass, which is a really comprehensive dive into the world of freehand quilting. It's learning a whole series of motifs. There are more than 30 different designs, but more than that, it is, much like these YouTube episodes, it's teaching you some thought processes that help you find your own wings and create your own original designs. So Dave's probably put a link in for that too, because he's good that way. So let's talk quilting now. I'm loading using the red snapper system, which you guys see me use every time, which I love, but this method works equally well for pins. But what you need is one straight edge on your quilt. So I've chosen to put the cut edge of my quilt on this side because, as you saw when I showed you the fabric, there's dinosaurs and they're directional, and my quilting is going to be kind of laid out in stripes, and I want them to go from side to side. So I've just thought about that orientation before I loaded my quilt. Many times I choose to load my quilt the other way around so that it's long ways this way. That's more efficient usually for a quilt, just in terms of how many passes you have. But you do need to think through the particular quilt you're working on. So in this case, I have a directional backing and directional quilting, so I have to make sure that it's oriented correctly, right? There's not really a top to my quilting and a bottom. There's just a side to side. Does that make sense? Anyway, I've got my straight edge loaded here, and my selvages are going to run up and down on the sides. So my quickie method of loading involves putting a straight side on the front. So whether you use red snappers or whether you use pins, or in fact whether you use magnets, attaching one side to this roller and then pushing all of the remaining fabric of the backing over the back rail of the long arm. And now I'm going to come around to the other side of my long arm. This is a very small quilt, but especially when it's a big one, it's really important to come over to the other side and pull that backing fabric straight. Here's what's critical. In order for it to roll on straight, you can't have it pulled off to one side. Do you see how if I move it even half an inch, I start getting these funky little pulls going on? So it's important that it comes straight over the long arm rail. Just like that. And then I start rolling it up. This one, again, is very small, so there's not a lot of room to be checking. But when I do have a really straight edge on the side of my quilt, I can actually be watching down on my lower rail as it's rolling up, and I can see that this edge is going perfectly straight. So it's just one more kind of check and balance there. So now I'm just pulling it on, and that tension is pulling it on straight. And I just pull until I can see that it's nearing the end of my leader. And then I come around and attach this end. And again, whether you use red snappers or whether you use pins, the method is essentially the same. Pulling that fabric on has kept it straight and smooth and flat, and it's easy peasy. There you go. Just like that, my backing is loaded, and you can see there's even tension. One side is not tighter than the other. Nice and smooth. I'm happy. Okay, batting is next. We're using my favorite Hobbs 80/20 cotton poly today. Thread on there. I've cut it really close to the size of my quilt top today because I'm using with the fabric for my quilt backing, and I also purchased with the fabric for my quilt top. But I really like to be able to put some tension on these edges as I'm working. So I cut my quilt top, I trimmed the selvages off so it's just a little bit narrower, and I trimmed my batting so it's pretty narrow too, so that I can see these edges of my backing, to know that they're straight, to be able to clamp to them. I just like having them visible to me. So there's my batting. And Hobbs, by the way, as far as I'm concerned, does not have an up side and a down side. Either side works, so you don't really have to worry about it. And here's my top. And again, I've just trimmed, about 1.5 inches off each side. I'm still working with a very slim margin on each side. So it's just something I'm going to have to be cautious about. I maybe even have less of a margin than that. It seems like, being different brands of fabric, some are a little wider than others. So I trimmed about 1.5 inches off, but it's only about 1 inch narrower. But I think we can make it work. Okay, there's my top. Beauty. Now I am floating my top, which means this end will just be loose. So is my batting. They're just hanging down in front of me. And my next step is going to be to baste the area where I'm working to hold everything still and straight and secure and all those things. Guess what I need, you guys? Glasses. Now that I'm done looking toward the window and talking. So I've chosen as nearly a matching thread as I could find in my thread selection. And it is Isacord brand 100% polyester thread is what I'm using. I'm not sure what this color looks like on screen to you, but it's just a slightly bluish, almost lavenderish silver. It's a really pretty color, and it matches the dinosaurs on the back of the quilt quite closely. I'm fortunate to have a magnetic channel lock on my machine. So you maybe heard that click, and I'll show you this in a minute. I cannot move my machine forward and backwards. That magnet is holding it in a perfectly straight line. Not every machine has that. You could also do this with a ruler. But if you do have the channel lock, it's so nice for making a perfectly straight line across the top and even perfectly straight lines down the side. And then also, you have perfect 90-degree corners. So it's a great way to get a really square quilt top. I often fudge it and don't turn these side channel locks on. You do you, and I'll do me. But it does make a really precise result, for sure. All right, channel locks off. Now, the million-dollar question is going to be whether I can put my side clamps on and still quilt close to them. So I'm going to give it a try on this first pass. If I find that that's not working, I may actually move my side basting lines in a little bit just so that I think I'm going to have to do that. I don't know if you guys can see it, but my basting is right up against my clamps. So my choices are two. Don't use clamps or make my quilt smaller. So let me just think for a second. I feel like the quilt is small enough and I'm confident enough about the smoothness of the backing that I can get away without using clamps on the side. I don't think I would do that if it was a larger quilt or if it had maybe a pieced backing and I was just a little worried about keeping it flat and smooth. But in this case, I'm going to try and quilt this thing without side clamps. We're going to give it a try. Okay, before we launch into the actual quilting, let's hear some questions. Let me get my coffee cup and take my glasses off. Rid of the glare. Laura Potter, why do we only clamp the backing? Well, if you were to clamp the whole quilt within the basting area, that would really get in the way of what you're quilting. If you're wondering why I only clamp the backing after I've basted, I feel like if you clamp the backing first and pull it taut and then baste your top on, the backing has more tension on it and is going to have a little bit of stretch. So I think it's wiser to smooth it all out so it's all equally flat and tension-free, baste it, and then when you clamp on the backing, it's pulling all the layers, right? So there's, yeah. Never mind, I answered my own question. Well, there you go. You got a double whammy.
Let's give a thumbs up for Laura Potter.
Yeah, let's give a thumbs up to Laura. Good job thinking through that. Okay, that was the only question? Wow. Okay. So today I am doing a design. I should not keep referring back to the first Wholecloth because some of you may be watching, only this one as your first one. So here's a couple things that I did. I know that I want my design to be basically stripes. So I've used my trusty plexiglass design board, which is just a sheet of inexpensive plexi, and Dave, bless his heart, put duct tape around the edge of it so that I have a frame so I don't inadvertently run off the edge with my dry erase marker, and also so I always know which side is up, so I never put the marker residue bit down on my quilt, right? This is always the top. It's a bit dingy. I don't really care. It serves its purpose. Let's move that for a minute. For this board, I use a dry erase marker. Where did I go with it? There it is. Like so. And I just have a scrap of batting for my eraser. So basically what I worked out on my board was what I want my stripe to be comprised of. And this is totally up to you. And in the Wholecloth series, I'm going to play with some different things. When I did Wholecloth number 1, we actually created chevrons. So there was this zigzagging action and it was really interesting and I liked it a lot. But I want something different. And the kind of, it's not exactly a feather, but the big focal stripe that I'm going to do today does not turn corners super well. So I decided for today's purposes, it's just going to be stripes. And it illustrates another technique, right? So I kind of worked out my spacing for what I wanted in each stripe and how far apart, and actually did my little math. I don't know that you can see it over here, but it's there. And I'm just keeping this board near my work area so I can keep referring to it and remembering what comes next. But then I also took, and this, you guys, is genius. I'm sure I learned this from another quilter, but I don't now know who to tell you. But on my ruler, you'll see it more as we do some close-up photos. On my ruler, I have marked the locations of my stripes, the spacing that I worked out on my plexi board. I marked with an actual Sharpie. I know you cannot imagine you would use an actual Sharpie in your quilting, but I am going to do it. So it's on the top edge of my ruler. I've put those lines in place. So now I can just drop my ruler and put my marks in place really quickly. They're all the same. I don't have to do that mental math. I don't have to really think through what comes next in each stripe. It's all laid out for me on here. And when I'm done this project, a little alcohol swab will take those Sharpie marks right off my ruler, clean as good as new. It's absolutely genius. It's really helpful if, in this case, I have repetitive things that I don't want to figure out. Also helpful if you have odd measurements like 5 inches and you're dividing it into 3. And you don't want to have to figure that out every time. You can figure it out once, mark it on your ruler, and just keep using it for the duration of the quilt. Super, super handy. So now I'm into my purple air erasable marking pen to actually mark these dots. And I don't know if you guys saw, I think we're probably going to get the close camera here. When I was up in this corner of the quilt, my machine actually dropped a teeny tiny drop of machine oil on the quilt. For the moment, I'm just going to leave it. I have learned from experience that much of what is in my machine oil actually evaporates. So by tomorrow, that spot probably won't show at all. And if it does, at that point, I'll hit it with a bit of Dawn dish detergent. So it's not catastrophic by any means, even on this solid fabric. So now you guys can see my ruler, right? And you can see my Sharpie marks on there. So this is the top edge of my quilt right here. And then I can drop in these markings for the spacing for my stripes. So really, really easy. And then they'll just repeat. See how easy that is to not have to think through those markings? And there's nothing worse than getting a stripe quilted in there and then realizing you quilted the wrong stripe. I've done that before. So this just really helps. You know you've got the right order. I mean, I guess you still could place the wrong thing in the right place, but at least you've got the right size of stripes. And I kind of thought through the spacing and tried to make it, I don't know, pleasing, proportional. I'm not sure what the words are that I want. So there's the wide stripe that has the feathery looking one. There's some variation kind of in texture in the stripes. And I won't belabor it. You'll see it as we're doing it. And then you can let me know what you think of my stripes. Do you know what I'm going to do, guys? I'm going to put Lucy's needle down. And I'm going to pull the quilt forward to me a little bit. I'm really quilting at arm's length. I love having a 26-inch throat when I am doing something big and need that space, but in general, it's much easier to quilt closer to myself than that. So here I am going to make use of my channel locks, which I know not all of you have. So if you have to do this with a ruler, then you would need to actually draw the line across and quilt it with your ruler. But in my case, I have these channel locks, so I just line up with my little dot and start quilting. Now I happen to know what's in these stripes and what is coming next, so I'm kind of thinking through that as I quilt, because I am going to do some ribbon candy, and at least until I get sort of warmed up, I find that to be much easier from left to right. What's happening? Yes, it is. Dave's commenting that I didn't land with my mark over there. You know what, guys? I'm not sweating the small stuff, but that basically happened when I rewound my quilt. But that is a very, very small, small difference. I'm not going to worry about it. I do not sweat the small stuff in my quilting. There we go. Look at that. Are you happy now, Mr. Producer? So this stripe now, it's 1.5 inches, by the way. It is going to get ribbon candy. Dave's telling me that somebody is asking about magnets, so let's pause. You guys are better than a conscience. You're better than Jiminy Cricket. Yes, in all my talking, I forgot. My magnets need to go on the front rails.
Get a thumbs up for Christy Bailey.
What they do, Christy, bless your heart for reminding me. What the magnets do is secure the fourth side of my quilt, right? I've basted left, basted top, basted right. I need to secure that fourth side, which otherwise is just loose and could shift, and I don't want it to shift. So those magnets on my iron magnetic rails just hold everything slick and smooth. Thanks again, Christy. You're a keeper. And I'm just trying to fill my whole stripe but not go over it. So in many cases I'm a couple threads away from quite touching the perimeter. I can't talk a whole lot or the ribbon candy starts to tangle. Ribbon candy. Okay, and now I'm going to do this top one, which is just going to have a little wavy line running through the middle. And I'm kind of doing that on purpose. I want stripes that don't have much detail or have a bit of fluffiness to them next to stripes that are a little more intricately quilted. It makes these stripes interesting to the eye when the quilt is finished. There's that one. Channel lock. Do you notice I'm going to slow down here and talk a minute. I'm putting my left hand just with a little bit of pressure on the area that's been quilted. I find that if I don't, my hopper foot is apt to push the fabric in front of me, and then you get that twisted look that you sometimes get when you're sewing in alternating directions. So just that little bit of pressure on what's already been quilted just pulls the new stuff under the needle a hair faster, and just that little bit of prevention is the cure for that problem. If you happen to have quite a lot of excess fabric, then you just push a little harder, and it takes up an amazing amount of excess. And Dave is so right. My lines are not precisely adding up. So note to self, don't move the machine after you've marked the lines because it messes with the spacing. So I'm just accommodating a little bit for that. I will come back after the show is over and put the measurements of these stripes into the show notes in case you want to recreate it. Certainly you could make them larger or smaller as you wish, but I've got the ribbon candy at 1.5 inches, the squiggles at 1 inch, and this one that I'm doing now is 3.5. Just making sure everything is flat and smooth because this is going to be a big and pretty one. Get ready. I was kind of going for a look that sort of said dragon fins to me. But essentially it's constructed like a spineless feather. And if you're not familiar with this spineless feather, it just means that there is no actual quilted spine that you're quilting up against. It's just an understood spine. And in this case, you can see as I get along further, it's kind of waving, kind of a gentle scallop almost. And I'm just doing 3 spines on each side of it. And I kind of use the back of those long ones as a launching point for the next set of 3. I definitely recommend drawing this one out, preferably on some kind of plexiglass audition sheet to kind of get your spacing right and to work out, you know, how long to make the 3rd one and that sort of thing. I've quilted this one quite a few times before, so I felt pretty comfy just launching into it. But that's kind of important, is to figure out how your spacing works. And yours might look different than mine, and that's absolutely okay. You don't have to figure out my spacing. Just figure out what looks pleasing to your eye. But I thought this kind of angular dragon fin tail kind of look really suited this dinosaur print that's on the back. And now I'm just going to pretend like I'm going off the edge. Just like that. And that marks the end of one full repeat. So this quilt now is just going to be rinse and repeat. That exact process. Okay, anybody have any questions, Mr. Sir? So that I can get a cup of coffee in, sip of coffee? Apparently he's working on the sound a little bit, so I will let him work on that and I'll keep quilting. Oh, we're golden, we're golden. Okay, which camera am I on? Can you put me on the main one, or is Lucy in the way? Okay, there we go. Glasses off. Questions coming back. There we go. Sue, where is the Demystified class going to be showing at today? Facebook, YouTube. The link is in the chat. It is on YouTube, but the link will take you right there. Yes, Mr. Producer is clarifying for me. It is unlisted, right? So that not everybody can find it. So you can't just go to my channel and hunt for it. You won't see it there. You've got to take the little link and it'll take you straight to it, okay? And we'll try and be on a little bit early, like 10 or 15 minutes, so that you can see that we're there and there's a countdown happening and you know that you're in the right place. Any more? Oh yes, Betsy. Can you see where the needle hits the quilt and where the horizontal line is so you know where to turn, or does that come with experience? So I assume you mean with my feathery portion, Betsy. And in my case, it's a bit of both, because honestly, the hopper foot on my machine is not see-through. It's metal. It's dark metal. But I can see where my needle is hitting. But I'll be honest, I seldom am looking at where the needle, like at the needle hitting. I'm always looking where I'm going. So I'm usually looking out in front anyways. And I think as you get more comfortable, that comes more easily. Any more? Okay, I'm going to get another sip in then. I do get so dry and parched from talking. I have, you know, it's not that I have to have coffee. I just have to have a little liquid. Sue Tap. Dave, if I click on the link in the email Susan sent yesterday, will that get me there? Well, I sent more than one email yesterday, but if it had to do with the workshop, then yes. Okay, and Betsy, no, the ribbon candy. I can pretty much see where the needle is. Yes. I mean, my hopper foot is little. It's got about less than 3/8 of an inch of clearance inside the circle. So there is some sense, kind of like driving, of knowing where your front bumper is, knowing where your needle is, because the hopper foot does get in the way a bit of seeing. It does come with experience, Betsy. It does. It gets easier, I promise. It's just like handwriting. It gets easier to stay between the lines. That's all of them. Okay. So I'm going to make one more change, you guys. My machine has programmable buttons, which I love. So I can actually turn one of my buttons to become a toggle for turning my channel lock on and off. And I'm going to do that because I'm doing so many horizontal lines. It's a time saver, and if you don't have that option, I'm sorry. I do love it. It's one of the things I love about my machine. So just at the push of a button, I can turn that channel lock on and off. At the push of a handlebar button, even, instead of having to reach up to my screen. And again, this is the ribbon candy stripe, so I like to quilt my ribbon candy when I can, from left to right. A little later, as I get warmed up, I'll do it right to left for you, so you see I can indeed quilt both ways when I need to. Seems to be working fine to have my backing without tension on it. The only time I see it sagging a wee bit is when I start at each side. So when I need to, I'm just hanging on to it with a finger and thumb. But it seems to be doing okay. And if you see a close-up here, Betsy and all the rest of you, my ribbon candies are not exactly precise. They're not all hitting right on the line. I'm trying to stay within the line, so I'd rather be 2 or 3 or 4 threads short than extend over the line. So I'm just getting them as consistent as I can, but they are not perfect. And it's going to look okay. These designs are really good practice for moving your feet without stopping. You can, of course, pause and stop, but it's pretty hard to keep a smooth little scallop going on if you do. And here's where I'm just grasping the edge with my finger and thumb, just until I get going into it a little bit. And that ensures that there's no little pleat happening at the edge there on my backing. The trick to the feet, by the way, is to never shift so far that your weight is on your leading foot. I was talking to a student who had done tap dancing in her youth, and she said they talked about that a lot. Whatever foot your weight is on, it is anchored. So as that relates to quilting, have your weight on your hind foot, so to speak, and just be taking steps forward with your leading foot, but never transferring your weight all the way onto it. And that enables you to pick up that leading foot and move it out in front of you. And it's just one more thing to think about while you're quilting. Alrighty, it is time to advance. Let's take my toggle off. Now, I have learned by experience that it does not work well to leave needle down and advance a quilt when you're doing these horizontal lines. So if you've watched me do my edge-to-edge projects, I often do just leave my needle down, advance the quilt, and keep on going. But when you want parallel lines, it does mess with that spacing a little bit. So I do go ahead and break thread when I'm doing parallel lines like this. I also, just a little trick for you, make your roll not be between 2/4 inch lines, but instead between two wider spaced lines, and that way if there's an 1/8 inch off, it's not going to show. That's my tip for the day. So you notice I did my 2/4 inch lines before I rolled, and now I've got a 3.5 inch line coming up next, and that will be much more forgiving. So again, I'm just going and continuing my basting down each side. And you see me doing my cheating. I'm not putting my channel lock on. I am, however, aligning the side of my quilt top with my quilt backing. I'm keeping that nice and even. I think it's nice and even. Yep, looks good. And I just make my basting stitch fall well within where the binding seam is going to go, and that way it never has to be undone. A lot of quilters baste with a much larger basting stitch. You absolutely can. I just don't feel like taking the time to change the stitch length, so I just baste with whatever I'm quilting with, which happens to be 14 stitches to the inch right now. I don't always quilt that fine, by the way. I often do 13, 12, or even 11. But when you're quilting fine things, like the ribbon candy, for example, you get a smoother curve if you have a little bit more stitches to the inch. Especially if you're quilting bubbles or pebbles, that matters. So that's why I went that high with it. Okay, it's all basted, and this time I'm remembering to put my magnetic rails on the front. There we go. So feel free to be typing in questions if you have them as we're going. It helps if you put a Q in front of them. That way, if there's a lot, we can search for them and find them. We have a comment? Yeah?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the best view. We're going to go overhead.
Okay, well, I have to read on this one. We're just messing with camera angles here. Lauren, I have to keep reminding myself that freehand is not computer generated, so it will never be perfect, and non-quilters would never see our imperfections. At least that's what I tell myself. You're absolutely right, Lauren. I mean, one of my mantras is always aim for consistency, not perfection. You're never going to get perfection, and you'll drive yourself nuts, you know, trying to achieve that. So don't. So the consistency would be, you know, the size of the bubbles in my ribbon candy, for example, but they don't perfectly match those outer edges. They don't. So that's just reality. Sue, is there going to be an issue with the rippling on the right side? I'm glad you asked that, Sue. I was just thinking the same thing because I saw it. I think you're seeing a little more just because of the way the light's hitting it. It's not that much, but the answer is no, there's not. It's going to totally disappear as I start quilting my stripes in there. In fact, doing things that have horizontal lines is one of my favorite ways to fudge, to take up excess on the edges of a quilt. Just a tip. All right, we've got our edges basted. I have some lines in. Might be wise to put some more in. Good plan. I'll do it on the right, and then I'll stitch across, and then I'll do it on the left. So now I'm just lining up with my earlier marks, because I marked like one whole repeat. Now I'm going to do the same thing again. I am going to have to pay some attention to these ripples. There's a bit of wanting to pull in, so I'm going to put some tension on this as I'm quilting it. Another way to deal with that, and maybe I'll try it, is to actually put my grippers on and just have them sort of out of the way of my quilting area, if that makes sense. So there's still a little tension on there. It's not right where I'm quilting, but it's close and it helps. So I could do it either above or below where my actual long arm rail is. So I'm going to put it above in the area where I've already quilted. I am going to put my yardsticks under there so I don't hit those clamps, because you can see Lucy's rail is coming right out under that. So I just need to put my yardstick in such a place where my clamp is just has enough clearance to get above it. I'm also going to lower my roller just a bit because I see that there's going to be quite a bit of bounce when it's this high. It's one of the things with red snappers, wherever they are, there's a bit of a chubby spot where you need more clearance. I don't let it stop me. I just move my roller up and down. That's very easy to do. Let's turn my horizontal lock toggle back on. Okay, here we go. So while I quilt a line across, or a few lines, you guys quickly vote. Should I make my dragon fin, dinosaur fin stripe alternate left to right, or should they all face in the same direction? So I will quilt a few lines and give you time to comment. How does that sound? And again, I'm just putting gentle tension on the area that's already been stitched so that what's coming under the needle pulls under just a little faster than it might otherwise. Oh yes, forgot to draw the lines on this side. Yes, yes, yes. When I get talking, I often forget to be doing. And I would have room to draw a few more lines, but so as not to confuse myself, I'm going to keep with just drawing one whole repeat at a time.
Is it alternate, alternate, alternate?
So I don't know that you guys can see this, so I'm going to slow down for a minute and pause. I am watching, though I'm stitching here, I'm watching out at the right where this rippling was happening, so to make sure that I get enough tension on there so that this lays flat and I don't get a little pleat. Honestly, a tiny pleat would not be the end of the world because it would fall in the binding, but I am trying to watch out for it and prevent it if I can. There we go. Okay, are we getting comments on that, Dave? Everyone's saying alternate. Okay, that's great because I'm at that end of the quilt. Let's just lift my clamp a little bit more. In fact, I think I'm going to move it to below. I don't want to bump into that and make a really square-cornered fin. I think I'll do the same thing on the other side. Let's try that. Okay, here we go. Other direction. I'm quite pleased with the look of these. And thanks for your voting. I appreciate the input. And again, if you are finding this helpful, informative, interesting, I would love if you would share. I would absolutely love if you would hit the like button, the little thumbs up. It really does help me to reach more people, more quilters that want these same kind of tips. And my little reality show. Nothing too untoward has happened so far today, but it's not over, is it? clamps a little bit further. And here I'm going to put some tension on. And look at that, nice and smooth. And this time, just to prove that I can, we're going to do ribbon candy from right to left. Oh, and we've just run out of bobbin thread. So we're not doing that just yet. So this is a matter of personal preference. You guys know, if you watch me at all, that I usually do just run my bobbins till they run out. To me, it's easier than trying to mess with figuring out how many revolutions and that changing every time you change thread types and that sort of thing. What it means is I always have to undo a couple inches because the last few inches didn't have good tension on them as the bobbin was running out. And in this case, additionally, I feel like I don't want a thread splice in the middle of this stripe. That will really show. So I'm just going to take a minute and undo this little row. I've got about, I don't know, 16 inches. It's not bad. And the way I'm doing this, by the way, is as soon as I have a longish tail on the top that I can get a good grip on, I'm holding this top thread, I'm pulling it tight, like almost to breaking point tight. And that pulls up a couple of stitches, and then I get my seam ripper in there and clip one. And you can see it pulls out about 1 inch each time. Ish. The downside of this method is you've got to go back and pick all the little threads out, but it's fairly fast. And all those little threads are the bottom thread, so there's not usually residue on the back side of the quilt that you can't see. You've got the top thread in your hand, and I just cut it. I no longer have the top thread in my hand, but all the little tails are the backing, the thread from the bottom coming up. So once you pull them out, it's nice and clean and ready to go. Sometimes I get ambitious and get a roll of tape around my hands if I have a lot of these little threads, and it can be helpful picking them out. But it's just a little space today. We got this. There we go. Okay, I've got a fresh bobbin loaded. Let me just run and grab it. I like to load my own bobbins. I like to use, as often as I can, matching thread, top and bottom. So I have a freestanding bobbin winder, and while I'm out of camera, this is how long it takes me to put a new bobbin on the winder and push the start button and walk away. And then when I'm ready to change bobbins next time, it'll be ready. Now I do want to try and hit that line spot on. If I didn't, you know, again, not the end of the world. I would take a little moisture and a soft bristled brush and get those holes out of there that are showing. But if I can manage to hit the line right on, I won't need to do that. So I'm just doing a few lock stitches so it's nice and secure. Get my toggle back on. Okay, let's line it up. See how well we did. Look at that. Nailed it. There's a little tail. Now I don't always do a tension check. I do have a TOA gauge, but I'm looking at my stitching here and I can see that the top is pulling just a little bit straight, so I'm going to back off on that top tension. Apparently you're out of camera so you guys can't see, but just on that last straight line I did, I could just see that compared to the line before, the top thread is pulling a little tight, so I backed it off a little bit. But actually I feel like that's a good thing. Then I know my bottom is not wonky, right? But another test that I often do is to just run. Are they able to see anything, Mr. Producer, sir? Are they able to see anything close up?
Yeah, the camera's on. Just out.
Okay. Well,
Here, I'll show you what you got.
what I will often run, yeah, you can see that. Here's my finger underneath. And I will run my fingernail firmly on those stitches underneath. And if there's any eyelashing occurring, or if the if the bottom tension is tight, you will feel that on the bottom. So that's kind of how I gauge when I change my bobbin. I don't always check the tension on the TOA gauge. I do sometimes. I mean, that is what it's there for, right? But I probably run it about 25% of the time. I have just learned to really pay attention to how the thread is feeding through the needle. You know, if it's bubbling and wobbling, I know there's a problem. And looking at that top tension will often be an indicator. So I try to be attuned to what the stitches look like, how the thread is feeding, and that deflects a lot of problems right there. And look, she can stitch ribbon candy in both directions. It's kind of true though. I think a bit like athletic pursuits. You need a bit of warm-up to get really comfortable with it. If I just come into my studio, you know, first thing in the morning and try to quilt something intricate right off the bat, the control is just not there. So knowing that, even if I'm doing a design like this that has stripes, I'll do the easier stuff first to just kind of get my muscles loosened up and my head in the game, and then the more intricate stuff comes more easily. There we are. Okay, what's next? A 1/4 inch one, yeah. My marks are kind of fading because I used an air erase marker, so it's not lasting super well. And if, by the way, you live in a more humid climate, they may not work for you at all. Usually the blue markers are water erased, so then they stay until you remove them with a bit of water. I live in a very dry climate, so I usually can get away with the air erase ones. My machine happily stitches fairly nicely, going in both directions. But when I'm stitching on my own and I'm not, you know, on camera and I'm going a little faster, I do make my right to left be a bit slower. It's just a little bit sensitive about it. But if I keep my pace not too terribly fast, it usually goes trouble-free. If I really hurry it up, then I end up with broken threads. Each machine is different that way, and some machines have very strong preferences. Okay, let's just double check. The first one went left to right, then right to left, so we're left to right again. I was talking earlier about figuring out your spacing or your orientation before you quilt this design. So as I get a little further into this one, I'll tell you how I worked out my spacing and what works for me. There's my first pin. There's my second one. And I try to line up my second one with the third one of the last one. Does that make sense? So I'm seeing that I went quite wide with that second one. So now I'm going to make my third one a little thinner to accommodate. So this is how my mind is going while I'm quilting the whole time, right? So now I'm looking 1, 2. Again, I went a little far. So make the third one a bit skimpy. Better. So that may look different for you, right? But each of you kind of figure out your own mental, checkpoints, if you will. And that's how I managed to get the spacing look consistent. Not perfect, mind you, but consistent. See, there we go. I got a good one. They're pretty well lined up. Number 2 of this frond with number 3 of this one. That's just kind of how I'm gauging it as I go. I did the wrong one. Let me see. Now the question is, do I want to undo it or not? And my answer is going to be no. I'm going to fudge it. And this is each to their own. Some of you might value perfection more than I do. I do not think that other people are going to notice that. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I chose. So now I'll stop talking and pay attention to my quilting until I get to the end of this stripe. And there we have it. Well, it's a conundrum, but I'll post pictures for you guys, but I do not think anyone who doesn't know my little secret would ever find that out. Sorry about that. Hit the wrong button up there. Single stitch, that's what we want. Okay. There's so many buttons to choose from. So I am going to advance the quilt once more so that I have room to do a whole entire repeat, right? In the interest of trying to keep myself on track. One entire repeat at a time is advisable. So I broke thread so that I could advance to keep my lines hopefully nice and straight across. And there's my red snapper getting in the way. Go. Okay, do we have any comments that we want to take while I get this organized? Is Lucy in the way over there? Okay. I can't see on the screen, babe. There we go. Let me get my cup. Sue Tap, this quilt is for a little kid. I don't think he or she will really care. You're totally right, but of course, I don't want his mom to notice either. But I mean, seriously, standing right here looking at it, it does not catch my eye at all. So I think it's 100% fine. Also, it makes a good story. Betsy, why, if you have channel locks, do you need to put dots on both sides? Just to determine the spacing. I see what you're saying, Betsy, like why couldn't you just put them, but I never know in advance necessarily which side I'm going from, right? You can see sometimes I do a few lines and then a few fills. It's easier than trying to think out which side I'm starting each line from. That's why. Teresa, hello from Springfield, Missouri. Love your videos. They've helped me so much. I'm so very glad. Hit that like button. Tell more people. Sue, what happens to the threads on the bottom? What if those bits get caught on the stitches that you sew over the previous area? Experiment for yourself, Sue. I assume you're meaning the little bits of thread from when I undid. My experience is that because I've got so much tension on that top thread, all the bottom thread bits end up on the top, and I don't have any residue left on the bottom. If that doesn't work for you, then maybe that method is not your choice. Dorothy, I'm loving the music. Thanks, so calming. Yes, Dan's music is very wonderful. Huge thanks to our friend Dan, who allows us to use his music. Lauren, can you show a close-up of how and what you are cutting when you come to the end or start of a row? What you are cutting? Maybe clarify, Lauren. I'm not sure what you're asking there. Oh, the thread. Is the thread break what you mean? Maybe clarify that for me. Any more? Okay. Here we go. Regina. At start of the design, you stitched each horizontal line that you came to it. After advancing, etc., what is the advantage to either way? No huge advantage, Regina. Only, if I want to do my ribbon candy from left to right, then I always want to be starting the ribbon candy on my left-hand side. But it doesn't matter. That's entirely up to you. In terms of the results of the quilt, doesn't matter at all. You could stitch all the stripes if you wanted to and then put all the fillers in. Shelby, I know you've mentioned before that you offer the masterclass periodically and one's coming up soon. When would, and I missed that, Dave, the end of the question. I wasn't fast enough. When would you guess the next opportunity might be? I'd like to start saving for it. I'm currently tentatively planning to offer the next one in November of this year, November of 2022, of opening enrollment again. There is also a payment plan if that's something that would suit you. 3 equal payments work as well. So if that fits into your world, that's an option, and I offer that at the end of the workshop. So, Lauren, yes, the thread starts and stops. Sure, we'll try and catch a close-up of that. Mr. Producer will put the camera on it next time I'm ending one, and I'll remember to tell him when it is. Okay, that's it. So, you guys, I have something to show you here. It's not concrete, it's not black and white, but this is reality, right? I'm showing you how I deal with this stuff. We probably need a close-up, Dave, of one side of on the machine to show this. Can you see here? Let me figure out. Yeah, there you can see it. See this ripple right here? Because I'm quilting this area above, it's starting to pull in. The quilting is pulling in a bit from the sides, and I'm getting this, and I've got to deal with that, right? There's no point in just pushing it on. It'll get worse and worse and worse. So what I'm going to do is, when I base this side, I might as well do it right now. So I'm pulling up my bobbin thread, doing a few lock stitches. I'm going to put some tension on what's already been stitched to pull what has not yet been stitched under the needle a little faster. And I did this before, which is why you guys saw those ripples happening. I have not figured out a way to never get any ripples like that. Like, we're dealing with fabric which is malleable, and it happens. I just find if I do deal as it comes and never let it build up, it produces a fine result. So I'm pulling what's behind my needle under the needle just a little faster than it would go on its own. And you can see there's a little bit of visible puckering going on. It's a pretty small amount of actual fabric in here, and it's going to disappear. You can see up here, this is where we had the puckering before. Can you see that? There we go as I get closer. This is where we had the puckering before, and that has entirely disappeared into the, the fabric has a bit of flexibility, and it just takes that all up without any trouble. So same thing on the other side. And you can see, yes, underneath my stitching here, you can kind of see there's almost a bit of rippling happening there too. And that's inevitable because this quilting is pulling in up here, right? There is some pullage, and we just have to manage it. All the area that's unquilted is laying a little flatter and a little smoother. So that's just something I'm conscious of as I'm working. But I don't, the side clamps would help. You would not be seeing that puckering, that's for sure, if I put side clamps on. But I can't do all the things on this one. I would have to make my quilt smaller. So this is my choice, is to manage it this way, right? You might choose to make your quilt a couple inches narrower so that you could put better clamps on the sides. My point, I guess, was that you know that's not a fault or a defect in your quilt. That's just something you can manage as you're quilting it, and it'll be okay.
There's a question there. Is it the rippling?
Okay, there's a question about the rippling. Dorothy, when you ease out the rippling, do you change your marking? No, because my marking is just on the edge, and I just make my straight line across. I hope that answers your question. The rippling really is so very small, it's threads worth. We're not talking even 1/4 of an inch of excess fabric, so it's not really affecting the spacing of my lines. Just because it's a solid fabric, because it's perfectly smooth, you're really seeing that rippling catching, catching the light and catching your eye. But it is not severe. Clamps. And we've got probably 3 more repeats. And by the way, if you want to do this for yourself, I mentioned that I'm using width of fabric, and then I bought 1.25 yards, so top to bottom. That would be 45 inches, top to bottom. That does not seem right because it's longer than it is wide. I'll have to measure it after I'm done. I really thought I bought 1.25 yards. Okay, let me turn my horizontal toggle on. There we are. Again, my little bit of tension on what's already been stitched just helps pull that tiny smidge of fullness smoothly under the needle. The real key is just not letting the fullness get away from you. That's what's critical. It can be managed if it's a little bit at a time. It's when it accumulates, compounds, that's when you really run into problems. Are disappearing. My lines have disappeared. Let me just check on the other side. They're still visible. I must have made them a little too light a hand. So again, I'm just grabbing on that edge, keeping a little tension on it. For Betsy, who was asking about whether why I'm doing it in the order I'm doing it, why I sometimes do a few lines and why I sometimes do the fills as I go. It might be advantageous to actually quilt a few of these lines when you're dealing with this little bit of rippling in the fabric, because it's sort of like dividing and conquering, right? You get all your lines in place, and then you can do the fill and nothing sort of untoward is going to happen. So let's try that for this one. Just for interest's sake and to show you that this is a perfectly acceptable way of doing it, is put all the lines in first. Then if you were nervous about there being any ripples on the backing of the quilt, for example, underneath, you could get under there and look and head that problem off at the pass. So there's any number of ways to approach it. One more. There we go. I'm just double checking them to make sure I've got the right ones in the right place. And yes, they are right. Just wanted to be sure. Okay, we can take a couple questions, and then I want to start the feather part from the right-hand side. Let's take a couple questions. Okay. Here we go. Coffee in hand. Sue is asking, on your machine, is the stop and go button only on one handle? On my machine, Sue, I actually can program my buttons to do anything I want them to do. So there's about a dozen things. I choose to always keep my start and stop under my right-hand thumb because that's the one I use the most and it's so automatic. But I could make it be either button or neither button, any of those things. That's just exclusive to my machine, the brand that I have.
Is it 2 parts?
Okay, part 1. Doreen, do you usually guide your machine or just on certain designs? Okay, and oops, I meant with 2 hands. I probably mostly guide with 2 hands. I think I go faster when I have 2 hands, and it's more evenly fatiguing on my shoulders when I use 2 hands. But I use 1 hand whenever I need to manipulate the fabric a little bit. So whenever I have fudgy things or excess fabric or whatever, yeah, then I quilt with 1 hand. There are advantages. Okay, let's set that coffee down. My whistle is wet. Let's quilt our feather. And here's a good example. I'm using my spare hand to kind of hang on to the outer perimeter of this fabric because I don't have a clamp on it. This one's going to be a little funky as to shape. But you have learnt alongside me, haven't you, that quite a bit of funkiness can be taken up and it just does not even show. I've told the story a few times. I don't know if I've ever told it on my channel here, but a few years ago I had the opportunity to see a very established, very a well-known quilter with a sterling reputation, and she was teaching classes, and I had the opportunity to attend her class and see her trunk show, and so therefore to see a lot of her quilts, you know, up close and personal. And I was astonished at the level, and I don't mean this critically, but I was astonished at the level of imperfections that was in her quilting and how beautiful it still struck me. So I think that was my biggest takeaway from that weekend of classes with her, is that perfection is not required, not even close. Like, her quilts were so gorgeous. I mean, she's a published author. She has quilted for big names, all the things. And it was not perfect, but it was sure beautiful. What's left? Oh, a few things up here yet. Let's do ribbon candy left to right for a change. There we go. And someone was asking about a close-up of breaking the threads, Dave. So let's do that now if we could. We're on close-up. So, let me take my toggle off. Sorry about that. Your machine might be a little different than mine. You might have an automatic tie-off. But what I do is do 4 or 5 or 6 stitches in very close succession over each other at a minimum. And they're off in that little binding area, right? They're going to get trimmed off later or hidden in the binding, so you don't have to worry about them being pretty, but you don't want your line of stitching to come undone. And then I take one more stitch that pulls up that bobbin thread, and then I trim them. So apparently the machine head was in the way of seeing that, so next time I do it, I'll do it the other way. It's kind of funny how these things are so automatic to me because I repeat them so often and I pull my machine in exactly the same way every time. So there are 2 more stripe repeats, folks. So that's about how our time is looking. Well, actually, there's only 1. This is a live show, so you guys get to see something fun right now. I bought my backing some time ago, and I just bought my front the other day in preparation for this show. In fact, I think my show notes, I hadn't decided yet which one I was going to use of the several backings I had to choose from. So can you see here? I've actually got more top than I have backing. My backing is ending. Let's go the other way. My backing is ending right here. So an easy problem in this quilt, right? We're just going to end our quilt probably after 1 more repeat, maybe 1.5. If I were to repeat this little area again, that's what I started with at the other end, so that would make a nice frame to it. And then I'll just trim off that excess, so it is not a problem at all. It's live and unscripted. And FYI, that has happened to me on an actual quilt. Fortunately, it was my own. If you look for the episode entitled Filaments, I ran out of backing before I ran out of quilt, right on camera. And I didn't do the fix on camera because I ended up having to unload it off the long arm to do the fix. But what I did do on camera was talk about several options for dealing with that, depending on what your circumstance was. And in my case, well, I'll let you watch the show to see it. Haha, how's that for a plug? While we're talking about that, these shows, by the way, air the 1st and 3rd Friday of every month. And I call them live and unscripted. They're usually one whole project from start to finish. They're not a class per se. I'm just talking through a project as I'm doing it and the various skills and tools and things that apply to it. So 1st and 3rd Friday of every month, I call them live and unscripted. If you join my newsletter, you will get advance notification of when they come, and if I know in advance what the topic is or what the quilt is that I'm working on. In addition, I have a podcast that you might be interested in listening to called Measure Twice, Cut Once, and Other Life Lessons Learned from Quilters. And it can be enjoyable. It's just a casual conversation between me and other crafters. And what am I missing, Dave? Oh yes, I have a workshop this weekend. One is going out this afternoon, being aired live, and one tomorrow. And it's called Freehand Quilting Demystified. And it's 5 myths that I think tie freehand quilters in knots and how to break free of them. So if you're interested in that, Dave has pinned a link to the workshop. You can still register for it. There's still time. It's entirely free. So I'm talking through those myths, giving lots of photographs, busting those myths up. And then at the end, I am presenting information about my freehand quilting masterclass, which is a huge online course that teaches a whole lot of freehand edge-to-edge quilting designs, teaches a lot about the tools and tricks that I use in my studio, and about the thought processes that I use for designing. The goal being not to just give you X number of designs that you know, but to give you the ability to create your own designs, to see something that you think, I can quilt that, and how do you translate that into a quilting design? Let's see a comment while I am marking. Sue, it was seeing imperfect quilts for the first time that gave me the permission and confidence that told me, yes, I can do this too. I'm glad to hear that, Sue. And honestly, seeing that lady that I was talking about was well into my quilting, but it really freed me up too, to not be so picky about what I'm seeing so close up, right? So I started undoing, honestly, a lot less after I saw her quilts. because I realized how little perfection is actually required. Here's a tip for you though, and you're seeing it at work today. Using a matching color of thread to the top that you're working on really helps too, because once it's released off the long arm and you step back, even a step or two, all you see is the texture. You don't see the specific stitches. So if you're doing, you know, bubbles or backtracking and they're not perfect, you don't see that because the thread matches the quilt. So that's a really good sort of camouflage tip. So it looks like I'll have room to do a little repeat of the partial stripe, and I think that will be perfect. Oh man, I could not have done that better if I had planned it, you guys. Sometimes it just works out just right. I need to be a little taller here. Just perfect. I'm so pleased. Okay, all the lines are marked, so we have a repeat and a half left. So this is a great time to fire off your questions if indeed you have them. Maybe give me some thoughts about whether you are enjoying these little whole cloths and whether you'd like to see a series of these. I have a head full of ideas. You know I do. So, is this something that you really enjoy seeing, and should I do more of them? So I'm beginning basically in the way that I ended. You know, I'm starting in that little seam allowance area, and I'm just doing half a dozen or so really close stitches to anchor my thread tails in place. And we're up and away. I think I'm going to go ahead and quilt in all my stripes. Then I know where I'm at. I know that everything's square and clear. And it makes me feel very accomplished when I see them all in place. I'll try and remember when I'm done quilting all these stripes too. I'm going to pop my bobbin out and have a look at it. If it's close to being finished, I'll just go ahead and put in a fresh bobbin so that I don't run out in the middle of a line and have to undo again. Just to save a minute of time and a few holes in the quilt top. And by the way, those aren't holes, they're just openings where the needle went down through. And that's why a little spritz of moisture and a soft bristled brush would take care of those in a flash. That is often what I do when I have to undo some quilting in an area, and it really shows, especially if you're on batiks or something like that. Yeah, just a little spritz of moisture and a soft bristled brush, and those quote-unquote holes just disappear. I'm going to actually take a second and go right down to the bottom one. Why not? And just anchor that very bottom of the quilt in place. Did I start with a 1/4 inch at the top? I didn't. I started with the 1 inch marking. So I want to be right here. So I'm going to like the look of this. This is going to be symmetrical top and bottom of the quilt, which did not happen on my chevron one for obvious reasons. You can't make the chevrons work out quite that way. But I think I'm going to like that look for this stripe. There we go. Now that is the bottom of my quilt. And now actually I'm going to take a second to remove my magnetic bars because they keep catching on my shirt as I move. And now that that bottom edge is fixed, they can come off. I'm trying to see my lines here. There we go. Just a couple more lines and then we'll start doing all the fills. And that will wrap this project up. I would love to hear your opinions on what you think I should bind this with. Should I pick one of the other dinosaur colors? Like there's a kind of dark sagey green, there's a mustard and a peach. Should I go for maybe a stripe or a gingham to add a bit of interest? Or should I stay classic and bind it with the same fabric that's on the top? I do not think I'll bind it with the dinosaur fabric. For one thing, I don't have enough. I'd have to go get more. But I don't feel like that cut into narrow strips would necessarily be appealing. So as you can see, it does not matter one whit what order I do these things in terms of stripe versus fill. And I'm just traveling to wherever I want to quilt next within my binding seam allowance. You could, in fact, if you're the sort of person that gets in a groove, you could put all your stripes in and then do all your squiggly lines and then all your ribbon candy and then all your dinosaur fins. For myself, I find it fairly fatiguing to do a lot of ribbon candy all at once, but you might love doing that. You might just get into that rhythm and love it. So, yep, as I said, it does not matter what order you do them in at all. As long as you're confident that your stripes are organized correctly, you're good to go. Oh, we're even on the right side for our fins. Last chance for questions, folks. We're just about at the end. One last time, if you have found this to be helpful, interesting, informative, would you give me a thumbs up on this video, and would you share it with your friends who you think might enjoy the same style of quilting? I would sure appreciate it. And that is the end. Okay, let's show one last lock before we go. So I'm at the end. We're just going to switch camera here. You saw that I kind of took a shortcut and I kind of went like this, right? That does those stitches kind of all in one place. Otherwise, I will usually do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches right on close succession with each other. Then I pull a long tail and hang on to that top thread, take one more stitch, and that pulls up a bottom loop. Can you see that? So I've now got my bottom thread pulled to the top as well, which at the edge of the quilt doesn't really matter, but if you're in the middle of the quilt, you don't want a thread tail that's left hanging down underneath, right? So having the loop up here means that you've got your top and your bottom thread on the top side. Snip them close to the quilt and you're done. That's it. All right.
Lots of questions.
I have a terribly dry throat, so I'm gonna get my cup in hand. I'll leave the quilt out so you guys can see it. I'm so pleased.
Some of these are responses. You asked me about the whole month.
Okay, so I asked about the Wholecloth series, so apparently some of these are in response to that. Betsy, yes, these would be great, usable, practice different patterns quilts. They can be given away to guilds outreach projects. Absolutely. Baby quilts, gifts, lap quilts, for seniors in your life, all the things. It's a nice, fairly non-threatening, easy way to make a quilt and a great way to practice. Regina, continue the Wholecloth series. I'm definitely looking at this genre from a whole different perspective and confidence to add one to my bucket list. Great. Cindy, I love what you do, and I'm reminded of many routines we need and always see new designs. So yes, love Wholecloth as well as pieced. It certainly does make it easier for you guys to see the quilting too. Very much so. Wendy, love the Wholecloth demonstrations. So much easier to see the quilting. Yes. Yep, I realize that. Sue, I love everything you knew. Aw, that's so nice. I especially enjoy the shows that teach you how to deal with challenges. Yeah. It's real life. That's what quilting is like. Barbara, I can't do ribbon candy to save my life, and I'm very much enjoying the Wholecloth series. And Barbara, that's the beauty of a stripe like this. You can choose your favorite designs, the ones that work well for you. I did try to alternate ones that were, more close and dense with ones that are more open or different textures so that you see the visual stripe, but that's just a matter of personal preference.
It's a real issue, not a real issue.
Janet Russell, what is a comfortable time limit before shoulder and neck fatigue is the real issue? Oh boy, I think that is so individual, Janet, because some people really struggle with that. I don't, I'm fortunate that way, but I do take some steps against it. I do not quilt 8 and 10 hour days, certainly not all in one stretch. There are quilters that do, but for me, I break up my day, especially with summer coming. I do a lot of quilting early in the morning and often late in the evening, and I break up my day into chunks of quilting. So for me, a couple hours is about my limit, 2 to 3 hours. And then, even within that, doing some shoulder rolls, doing some twists, doing some movements, loosening those muscles, working at being relaxed even while I'm working and not, clenching. Sarah, do you recommend testing out a new pattern on a small quilt or on a sample, or do you just dive in? Again, really personal. Tons of quilters that I know say, doodle, 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 you've got to doodle. But for me personally, I usually use my little plexiglass board and I figure out my quilting path and I figure out my size and then I start quilting. That's how I do it. I quilt way better than I doodle. It's just truth. Lauren, can never go wrong with stripes in my opinion. I agree, and there's just endless scope for personalization in them. Betsy, do you ever use double batting? If so, when? Generally, Betsy, only when it's on a show quilt and I want some elaborate, really intricate, detailed quilting to show, because that extra level of puffiness helps the quilting to show. Like the one behind me actually does have double batting in it, so it's got this same 80-20 plus a puffier wool on top. Sarah, what about mental fatigue? How do you know when it's time to take a longer break? You've got to do what feels right for you. I know Mr. Producer always tells me I rattle on too long, but I do have a story for this one, and this is just from my personal experience. I love edge-to-edge quilting. I love the rhythm. I love getting going. I love the efficiency of it. I don't enjoy custom quilting in the same way because I find the design aspect of it, of thinking of new ideas, fresh ideas, something creative for each quilt, to be mentally fatiguing. So for me, I actually highly limit how many custom quilts I take in from clients because I find that to be mentally fatiguing. But for you, it might be something different, right? Doing repetitive stuff might be fatiguing for you. Learn what you love, experiment and play with that a little bit. Sue Tap. The challenges I'm referring to is uneven quilts, excess fabric in the borders, etc. Yeah, I kind of got that. Maybe all our viewers didn't, but it does seem like every quilt has something. It's not a defect by any means. I mean, challenge might even be too strong of a word, but it's just a feature, right? Because fabric is a flexible thing with give. So as a quilter, that's part of our skill, is learning how to manage all those things, keep an eye on them, keep them in check. The things you mentioned, yeah. Any more? Oh, there we go. Jody. Susan, how long have you been long arm quilting? I happen to know this exactly, Jody, because I talk about it in my workshop. February 26, 2015, I quilted the first piece of something on my long arm. That's how long I've been quilting. That's not really a fantastic gauge, though, because not everybody quilts the volume of quilts that I do. So I've passed 1,000. Because I love it and because it is my day job. I do a lot of it. So years are not really a fantastic measurement, but that is my story. Deanne, love your videos. Yes, a stripe would be a pop for the quilt. I missed this live without getting Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Oh my gosh, really? Thanks for the immense help getting my Sojo back. You're welcome. So glad I could help. Tiffany's Quilting Life. You did great. I love this. Yay, Tiffany. So one more plug for Tiffany. Tiffany's Quilting Life is also the name of a YouTube channel. Tiffany does very personal stuff like I do too. She gets on and shows what she's working through. Different style mostly than what I'm doing, but equally personal, and it's really fun to watch. And Tiffany was the guest on my podcast this past Wednesday. So that was, I think, the 1st of June was the date of that. Is that right? I think so. 1st of June, Tiffany was my guest and told a bit of her story, and she has a very encouraging story, so you might enjoy listening to that. Okay, does that cover it? Oh, Lori, for back strain when quilting, I've had 2 back surgeries, limit my time, and use a brace while quilting. Thank you so much for this time with us. I always learn something new. And yes, Lori has found she's got to make it fit what she can do and what her body is comfortable with, so that is quite personal. The back braces are good for anyone. Actually, that's a good tip. That would be interesting to try because you certainly are on your feet a lot of the time. So yeah, but we're not sitting at a desk. There is that. All right, guys, this has been really, really fun. Once again, if you enjoyed, please thumbs up the episode. Please share with your quilty friends or guilds where you think this style of quilting would be beneficial. I would sure appreciate that. And again, Dave has put a link at the top of the chat for the workshop that I'm hosting this afternoon and then one again tomorrow morning. If you're interested in that, it's 5 myths that tie freehand quilters in knots and how to break free of them. If you are watching on the replay, know that that is just effective for June 3 and 4, and then that workshop will be over. So I sure appreciate you joining me. It's been a real pleasure quilting with you, and I will see you on the 3rd Friday in June with a new project.